Hey everybody, Plushie here, and today we'll be delving into the second episode of the banner breakdown series, and we'll be featuring the 7th anniversary banner that is very rapidly approaching NA. And the banner of course features the very long-awaited Arcueid Brunstead. People's opinions surrounding her has been shifting pretty drastically, to be honest, throughout the years, and I feel like this is a perfect time to have a retrospect on the character as well as just a general discussion. Anyways, without further ado, let's begin today's episode of Banner Breakdowns on the 7th anniversary banner with Arcueid Brunstead. Arcueid is an AoE buster moon cancer servant that is usually considered more of a farmer than a challenge quest DPS. She excels in multi-core farming and is also pretty decent in single core farming. She is quite the rare unit as she has never gotten a rerun since her release, meaning that in JP she has not gotten a banner in almost 2 years. One of her biggest selling points is her 100 MP battery. This, combined with the fact that she's a buster servant, means that if you combo her with the cooldown reducing Koyan Sky of Light, she can potentially use that 100 MP battery multiple times. This does allow her to do interesting buster looping compositions that doesn't involve a 50 MP starting chart CE. However, because of the long cooldown of the 100 MP battery being at 7 turns, you actually have to combo her with 2 Koyan Sky of Light and an additional source of cooldown reduction, either from the Atlas Mystic Code or plugging in another targetable cooldown reducer such as Summer Ibuki. So running her with Black Grail, Double Koyan Light, and Plug Oberon is impossible like some other buster loopers that can run Black Grail such as Melusine or Tiamat. Arcueid's MP levels are also somewhat more valuable than other DPS MPs because it not just scales the base damage of the MP, it also scales the anti-trait percentage of the MP, and before this we've never seen any servant do this. They either scale with overcharge or it doesn't scale at all. Arcueid also just has a great anti-trait in anti-chaotic considering how wide it covers, so you will get more bang for your buck if you do decide to level up her MP. And finally, Arcueid's most unique gimmick is the Millennium Castle field that she can apply for 3 turns whenever she MPs. This is a buff that is independent of a standard buff and cannot be easily interacted with boss gimmicks. It appears on the top right corner of the screen instead of tied to each servant portrait. If Arcueid is within this field, it grants her a lot of special effects, such as some of her skills having the ability to charge MPs for her party members, or herself getting a permanent 30% rainbow buff as long as she is in the field. And this, despite being a field effect, does carry across different waves, so it does benefit her when she is farming. Speaking of farming, Arcueid's a pretty good farmer. As I mentioned before, one of her biggest selling points is her ability to run double Koyan Light no plug suit and with a Black Grail. So if you're talking about buster looping without a plug suit composition, Arcueid has the highest damage by a mile compared to all other options, I'd say. And of course, you can also choose to plug in another cooldown reducer, such as Summer Ibuki in particular is probably the best choice, but you can also use other units such as Edison or Takasugi. I will list all of them on the screen right now. She doesn't have the ability to run double Koyan Light Plug Oberon while still using Black Grail. The fact that she can run Black Grail over cranking compared to a lot of other buster loopers does still make her damage hold up in terms of buster looping. However, she will be losing that massive damage boost on the 3rd wave if you don't include Oberon on your team. That's just how it works. Or if you decide to have her do massive damage on the 3rd wave with a double Oberon comp, single Koyan Light, which works, but it will severely neuter her first 2-wave damage. But honestly, I still think her damage is not that big of a problem if you are comparing them under the context of cranking on most other servants versus Arcueid using Black Grail. However, this does kind of completely get thrown out the window if you are farming in an event that has a 50 MP starting chart CE, then all of her advantages in damage suddenly just goes away. Or if you just straight up don't have a Black Grail, then Arcueid's looping damage will start to feel a lot more potato. A lot of people do complain about her looping damage because most of her steroids are not easily stackable. Her MP damage steroid is tied to her battery, which is a 7-turn cooldown, so you don't always get to double cast it in all of her compositions. And her first skill has an attack up and an AoE defense down put together, so you can't really double stack the defense down part. This is a similar criticism to people have with Morgan in terms of her looping damage, so it applies to Arcueid here as well, of course. And Moon Cancer is of course also pretty bad. It's almost always neutral, and it also doesn't have the 1.1 times extra high hit multiplier like Avengers and Rulers, so it just feels really bad to use in general. However, in my opinion, Arcueid nowadays actually fits better as a multi-core farmer over being a single core farmer. Because Arcueid has a lot of things in her kit that work specifically well in a multi-core setup, and also a lot of her weaknesses in single core doesn't really exist in multi-core anymore. Because in multi-core, the steroids not being able to be double stacked with Koyan Sky of Light wasn't a problem to begin with, because you're not running double Koyan Light. So first and foremost, I think Arcueid has one of the best charge distributions in the entire game, having a self 100 MP charge and 30 for her other two teammates. This of course is conditional because the 30 MP charge is only applied to teammates that is in the Millennium Castle field, meaning that Arcueid has to MP first before being able to give that 30 charge to her other teammates. However, a lot of the times you are clearing the first wave with Arcueid anyways, considering her MP damage when not hitting trait is not crazy good, and also of course because of her 100 self MP charge. It's super easy to trigger immediately, so might as well use it. Tezcali Polka is considered one of the best multi-core farmers in the game right now, and a big reason behind that is because of his battery. He has a self 50 battery and a team-wide 30 battery in a single skill. Depending on the situation, Tezcali Polka can be more flexible than Arcueid, because even if he doesn't want to MP immediately, he can still help the team with charge. But on the flip side, he can't really easily immediately fire off his MP if he wants to on the first turn, and instead would require other additional charge from other teammates, while Arcueid can immediately use her MP. Arcueid also has the ability to charge her living human teammates by an additional 20 MP whenever she herself MPs, and there are a lot of good living human multi-core farmers like Tezcali Polka I just mentioned. They're actually amazing teammates in certain compositions. And of course there are also other great 50 charging just AoE MP units such as Ishtar, Durga, Muramasa, and Alice. And of course, Arcueid has that very juicy anti-chaotic anti-trait that scales with MP level. So if you have an Arcueid that is higher than MP1, you can probably clear a bunch of chaotic enemy waves without a lot of additional help from other buffers. Even though Arcueid has this reputation of essentially being exclusively a farming servant, she still has a couple of tools that make her stand out in a non-farming context. So first of all, she has essentially a permanent 30% rainbow buff because of her ability to infinitely refresh the Millennium Castle field. And it's not that great of a buff honestly, but it especially shines in situations where you run out of buffs from your own skills. Having this permanent rainbow is pretty nice under certain circumstances. And of course, she has a wonderful anti-chaotic anti-trait. It's wide coveraging and it scales with MP level. It's obviously not just good for farming, it's great for boss killing and challenge quests as well, considering how common chaotic enemies are. Arcueid also has a team-wide invul effect on her third skill, which is only one hit, which is not amazing, but honestly it's pretty nice to have in a pinch to block an AoE MP. But on top of that, she also has buff removal resist that she gives to all good attribute allies, including herself. Now that is a pretty rare effect. At the very least, it applies to herself, so it's already a nice anti-gimmick, but a lot of good supports are also good attribute, so you can easily build your entire team to also benefit from this effect. And this is honestly a really rare effect even to this day in FGO. The only SSRs that can do this for the entire team is Benyema, Murasaki, and Semiramis. And even though Arcueid's ability to do this is conditional, once again, you can just build your team around it, and even if it doesn't apply to everyone, as long as it applies to herself and another support, it's usually really worth it already. But there is a reason why people do consider Arcueid a farming exclusive servant, because her skills for challenge quests is honestly just pretty bland. They all have not a lot of effects, and because basically all of her skills are focused on enabling her to use her MP, and even though that is a really nice thing to have as a buster servant, a lot of the times in the challenge quest context you can easily make up for your ability to loop MPs by just using your face cards, and Arcueid unfortunately actually has trouble gaining extra MP with her face cards because of her horrible Moon Cancer class. She doesn't have very high star weight, and she doesn't have any skills to compensate for that, and in general her kit just lacks a lot of additional utility such as card damage stuff as well as self-survival compared to some of the other top tier DPSs such as Cool Khan or Melusine, and even if you want a DPS support hybrid in the AoE Buster Sphere, we've got better units such as Tonaliko and Koyanskaya of Dark. So yeah, unfortunately it's just kind of underwhelming. There's too little stuff in her kit that benefits her in a challenge quest scenario. So overall, I'm just going to briefly list out my personal pros and cons for Arcueid. In terms of the pros, she is a very convenient farmer due to her 100 MP battery for both single core and multi-core, and she aged particularly well in the multi-core farming sphere because of her ability to also charge her allies MP, albeit with a couple of conditions. Arcueid of course also has one of the best anti-traits in the game, not just because Anti-Chaotic has really good coverage, but also because it scales with her MP level, which makes it better than most other anti-traits, given that you pull for more than one copy. Arcueid in challenge quests also has a permanent rainbow effect that gives her sustainability even after her skill buffs run out, and of course that skill 3 is very unique as it can counter enemies that have team-wide buff removals, which is quite a rare effect even today. However, Arcueid also has a couple of cons, and first and foremost, she has aged a little bit poorly as a single core buster looper, mainly because single core buster looping in general has aged pretty poorly. Usually you only see them when the event has a damage CE that has a 50 MP starting charge, and when you are using a CE that already has starting charge, Arcueid's benefit really just goes away. This also sort of extends to the problem where if you don't have Black Grill, Arcueid is also considerably weaker. Arcueid, of course, her greatest benefit being the Anti-Chaotic that scales with MP level, also seems a little bit underwhelming if you only pull for a single copy. And in challenge quest, she is also pretty mediocre despite her very unique skill 3 compared to her other competition. And overall, Moon Cancer is just a horrible class, and she doesn't really have a lot of strong skill sets to make up for that fact. So of course, as usual, this is a banner breakdown video, so we will briefly talk about the other stuff that is featured on this banner. However, I'm not going to dwell on it because of the following reasons. So the other servant featured on the 7th anniversary banner is the 3-star alter ego Xufu. She is the strongest 3-star support in the entire game, acting as both a great challenge quest support for generating stars, cleansing your party's debuffs, healing, and giving your party crit buffs and whatnot, but also acting as a great budget arts looping support, having a targetable 30 MP battery, a team-wide MP game buff, and a team-wide arts buff. Basically a mini Castoria. However, Xufu is a permanent servant, and there's no point in rushing her MP levels because she basically does all of the things she does very well already at MP1, so you don't really have any incentive to specifically pull for Xufu on this banner. Right after this banner ends, you can pull her in friend points, or you will pull her in every other banner that you roll on in the future, so she doesn't really add any incentive to rolling this banner in my opinion. And finally, the CEs aren't amazing either. The 3 and 4 stars are expectably trash, and the 5-star is not horrible. I've seen it used here and there. It's a 50 MP starting charge CE that also gives the wearer arts up and arts crit up, and it has full attack stat, but honestly for most arts servants you will probably rather focus on MP damage rather than crit damage, so Ocean Flyer is an infinitely better option, and that's a completely free CE. So if you already have Ocean Flyer, there's no reason to pull for this CE realistically in my opinion, so the CEs also don't add any points to my recommendation. So the final recommendation score I'm going to give this banner is a actually relatively generous 2.5 out of 5, and the reason behind that is Arcueid is a very decent farmer, for multi-core especially, and she actually incentivizes you to pull multiple copies because her MP level actually scales better than most other DPSs. So I will give her a recommendation score of a 3 out of 5 because of that. But if you only are planning on rolling for 1 copy for Arcueid, then that score can go a little bit lower. The other part I will give a plus to is that Arcueid is a pretty rare servant, so if you are a collector that is really scared by FOMO and you don't want to wait another 2+ years for Arcueid to come back, then you probably want to pull for 1 just for collection purposes. Even though I personally don't recommend thinking this way, I do understand FGO is a character collection game, so I will give an additional 0.5 points towards the recommendation score. But Arcueid happens right before the highest power level summer we've ever gotten in FGO history, so I'm going to actually dock a full point from her recommendation score. Usually I only dock half a point from this kind of stuff, but because of how good Summer 7 is, I have to dock a full point. Because, in my opinion, all 3 SSRs featured during Summer 7 are better servants than Arcueid. We have Lady Avalon, who is essentially better Merlin and also arts, so she is like the second best support to bring in a challenge quest with Castoria. We also have Summer Ibuki, who's just a better universal farmer because of her arts card type. She has less restrictions with her support, and she's also a berserker, so she functions at a lower MP level. And finally, of course, we have Summer Scotty, who is basically the center of the quick meta, a must roll in my book. So yeah, very unfortunate for Arcueid how strong the following 3 banners are. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the second episode of Banner Breakdown. Please let me know what I can change in the future. I feel like I still yapped a little bit too much in the Arcueid section. I already tried to cut it short, but unfortunately, I'm just a yapper. And yeah, see you guys next time in the next Banner Breakdown.